Hello world. Today I'm going to talk about from where the inflation came from. This is the analysis done in October 22, but the video I did it in November, early November, first week of November 22. And what you see here, you're not going to see it elsewhere in the world, not in CNBC or CNN or anybody, because this is a original, fresh 360 analysis with no political agenda I have. I hope you will enjoy it. And I don't think even the Federal Reserve was aware with the points I'm going to share today. So from where the inflation came from, I'm Joseph Bonaparte, Associate Professor in Finance, University of Colorado. I'm a research contributor to institutional banks. I'm a director for externals. The inflation came, the seeds planted during Trump presidency, when they're lowering the interest rate to 0% and they injected $3 trillion, not Trump, the government doesn't, the president doesn't print money. The Federal Reserve print the money. The government print bonds and they sell it, and the Federal Reserve buy it or others can buy it. So the seeds planted during President Trump, it watered during President Biden. He did two mistakes, Biden. Also, Trump did the mistakes where he pushed the Federal Reserve to lower the rate and inject money. Jo Powell, the Biden mistakes is reappointed Jo Powell, and he's a disaster. Before COVID, he was a disaster in 2018. Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2018, we have the worst Christmas Eve ever in American history because of Jo Powell bad policy or uneducated or unsmart policy. So Joe Biden appoint a wrong person and reappoint him. And then he ran with the $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Well, this is important because when you have a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill, which is good, we want to have a good infrastructure, but the contractors will work for the government, not for you, for remodeling. So if you want to remodel your house, it's very hard to find a contractor because he's working now for the government, or she working for the government. So that takes us to President Reagan when he said government can't solve the problem, government is the problem. So in this case, Federal Reserve is the problem. You want to fix the inflation that he planted. So here's the truth. That's what happened. You're not going to see it in other places. Here is the truth. COVID hit China sometimes in December, but we thought it's another SARS or something. It's not going to be a big deal. So in January, America, the United States was everything normal, open economy, no problem. Kids playing in the sandbox if it's not snowing out, and NFL playoffs is almost set. We're happy for the Super Bowl in February. And then COVID-19 hits the US in early February 2022. President Trump and Congress closed the economy for health risk, and that's good policy. The unemployment went up 35%, layoff. Equity market went down 30 to 40%. The NASDAQ 40, the Dow 30, 35. Down. And then the mistakes starts and all the problems starts. The Fed lowers the rate to 0%. The Fed injected $3 trillion he put in the economy when the economy doesn't need money. Government stimulus also. And the economy reopened then in April 22, but in the summer, June to August, open more. So here is a money supply in the US before, usually it grow this way, but then 3 trillion went up a lot and then grow again. But notice that the money supply stopped here, no more growth, but not declining. And we're gonna touch on that because the Federal Reserve said, no, I'm taking money out from the market, but I didn't see it in the data. The Federal Reserve lowered the interest rate to 0. It was 1.5, good. He should lower it to 1 or 0.75 basis point, but he lowered it to 0, almost to 0. So free cash, anybody can take cash and buy house or car or whatever you want, you can do. Personal saving, we used to be at 6 to 7% and then went up around 35%. because people have money, but they cannot consume. The only thing we consume only food, grocery. So you go to your grocery store, you buy some food and you go home, but you cannot go vacation, hotels or restaurants or that. So everything was closed. And even it's open, you worry, you get sick or infected with COVID. But notice here, the saving rate went below after we opened the economy. As of today, the saving rate is way below the normal saving rate, almost half. And that caused inflation also. So because the spike in the saving rate, boom, so a lot of saving, the Federal Reserve thought, and I didn't blame them for this, that's a good thought back then. The Fed introduced a new term called transitory inflation, which means inflation will be high temporarily, then come down. The reason is a spike in saving rate. When the economy opens, people start spending, they go into the hotels and this, and then the inflation will go down, like a spike in the saving rate going down, the inflation up and down. But did not happen. Why? So here is a reason. The unemployment rate was around 4%, which is normal. That's the Federal Reserve goal, to have unemployment 3.5 to 4%. Inflation around 2%, which is also normal. Now COVID hit, the unemployment went up to almost this number. And then inflation went down. This is a scale for inflation, should be another scale here for unemployment. I think it went up to 35%. And they closed the economy, a lot of layoffs. We have nobody buying, ever trying to do discount, to encourage people's sales to buy, nobody buying. And then as we open the economy gradually, unemployment began to be down, and inflation going up. Notice here in June 21, we almost got back to where we're supposed to be, at 4% unemployment and inflation 2%. But here the Federal Reserve should do what's called soft landing. Soft landing means you start raising rate, cutting money supply, and then you don't want to wait till March 2022, which is about 9 months, to fight inflation. The inflation was like around 4 or 5%, not bad. So the figure says unemployment went up. I just explained that. Deflation in the economy then went up. So Fed mistakes, inflation grew in non-transitory fashion. So remember, as I said, you're not going to see it in other news outlet. Nobody understands. They thought that this spike will be translated in a spike in inflation. Did not. That's fine. It happened. But then the problem we have is the soft landing should be in June 21, not in March. Start thinking about it, March 2022. Just 9 months was a lot of time. So inflation grew in non-transitory fashion. So he said it's going to be transitory. It's not. That's a mistake number one. No hikes in interest rate, no cuts in the money supply till March 22, which means the soft landing came late. And the Fed lost flexibility. Wherever there is a lesson, always you should have flexibility. You should not go to high money supply and zero rate. You never should be at zero rate. So then the several rate hikes happen, and that's another mistake. You raise the rates a lot. You're not waiting for the economy to absorb these hikes. So that caused some imbalance in the economy. Now, he's not cutting the money supply, but he's saying we're cutting the money supply, we're working our balance sheet, but we don't. As I said here, we don't see the money supply went down. It's pretty much flat, a little bit, but he's continues saying that, and nobody called him out on this. Based on the data, he is not cutting the money supply. He should cut the money supply. Housing market is not cooling off because equity and bond market shift the cash to real estate. So when the Fed starts saying we're going to raise rate and we're going to do a lot of things, a lot of people sold their equity and bonds and have cash. What to do with the cash? Unfortunately, it went to the equity, to a real estate business. As a result, the demand for real estate increased, and even the interest rate should hit real estate business more than equity, but the impact was more in equity, less in interest rate in real estate. And that takes us to what are the Federal Reserve goals? Federal Reserve goals is to have low unemployment 3 to 4% and inflation 2 to 2.5. So the soft landing should be back then in June, if that's your goal. So in June 21 should be the soft landing. Start engineering. So the policy mistake is what happened in COVID. It's not unemployment high and deflation. It's the transitory unemployment was high. The transitory inflation or deflation and supply chain transitory problem. All of these are transitory, and the Federal Reserve should not respond to transitory impact. The Federal Reserve should respond to fundamental changes in the economy. And none of these were fundamental because Congress and Donald Trump, president, closed the economy. And when they open it, it will open the economy, but then unemployment will go down and will be demand and inflation. As I said, Fed should engineer a soft landing in June. Raising the rate multiple times without waiting to see what the results, that's a problem. The proper policy as of October 22, as I said, it's November, I'm recording in November, no big change. Stop the rate hikes. Now you're making a damage. And cut the money supply. He keeps saying I'm cutting the money supply, but he's not. Why we care? Why we care about the Fed problem? Why I'm doing this video? Because the Fed controls the world. The Federal Reserve controls the world. You say it's not a conspiracy here. I'm a professor and I'm a very educated person. It's not conspiracy. Not like there's six people around there where nobody knows about them and they control the world. No, I'm talking facts here. The U.S. Federal Reserve control the world because the U.S. currency as a dollar, the dollar, it dominates the world. For example, if Spain taking wheat from Ukraine, for example, or Russia, for example, then Spain will pay them in dollars because the future market in Chicago, CME, it's in dollar. So if the wheat is suppose $100 or oil or anything, any commodity, it's a price in dollar because all the commodities are priced in Chicago in dollar, the futures. So between two countries, the transaction is in the dollar. So if you want to buy something, you need to pay to the seller with the American dollar. And when the Federal Reserve raised the interest rate, that makes the dollar to be stronger and cause inflation to other countries. Even without countries, within a country, sometimes some of the prices are like rent is in dollar. For example, in Lebanon, if you want to rent an apartment, you will pay in a fresh dollar because the Lebanese currency is changing a lot, and the renters say, okay, pay me $1,000 a month for the rent, and I didn't care what's the exchange between the Lebanese lira and the American dollar. So even within a country, the dollar is the medium of exchange, and therefore, when the dollar is stronger, inflation causes in the country. So as I said, when the Federal Reserve raises the interest rate, the demand for the US dollars or bonds increases, and here's the supply of dollars. Here is the demand. When you raise the interest rate, so people want to buy the American bond because we become to be attractive, the yield going up. As a result, the exchange rate going up. So the dollar become to be strong. When the dollar is strong, that increases the demand for US dollar become to be strong. As a result, any exchange transaction in dollars, it will become to be more expensive. For example, if you buy a future contract for buying oil in June 23, which is 7-8 months from now, you said the transaction is going to be okay in June for $100 a barrel, for example. In June, you have to pay $100 a barrel. It doesn't matter what's the exchange rate. So when the dollar is strong in June, you're going to pay expensive for oil. So that's a result. The whole idea of all this video also is to talk about the Federal Reserve reform. We need to do Fed reform. We have election next week, midterm election. But if I am president of the United States, I will launch the Federal Reserve reform. First of all, we need to have a diverse board of directors, board of governors, they call them. They sit in some in New York, some in, every branch. Federal Reserve is San Francisco, Federal Reserve Cleveland, Atlanta. They have a president. Each president is part of the Federal Reserve Board or Board of Governors. So the Board of Governors are very white. All the presidents, chairman of the Federal Reserve are white male. Only one, she's a white female, Yedlin. She was the only one. But she's like previous policy. She was not a game changer. She just redo what previously has been done. So we need to diversify the Federal Reserve. The Board of Governors should have people from the business, from the community, activists, because these people feel the inflation, the high interest rate. Like, for example, a grocery store, maybe inflation 4%, but if your rent is going up because interest rate is up, that's 1/3 of your income is going to rent. It's become to be more expensive just because the Federal Reserve raised the interest rate. If he did not raise it, then you feel the inflation only in the grocery store, not also with your rent. So we should also include Nobel Prize winners in our council. We have smart people there. Jo Powell is not a smart person. I saw him many times. They ask him, why you want the interest rate to be 2%? He said, this is a norm. But there is nothing to, this is a norm. You would say equilibrium interest rate 2%. You can say it's a steady state interest rate 2%. Norm, that means you didn't know economics and finance. Somebody told you it should be 2%. So that's one of the shortcomings of this current. If you have a Nobel Prize winners in the board of governors, he would not say this language because they will teach him the proper language. But it's not a cosmetic, it's a fundamental here. You didn't understand what is that interest rate from where it should come. What's the optimal interest rate? He doesn't know it. And we know it. The interest rate, value of the interest rate, the level of interest rate has to do with the growth of population, immigration, GDP growth, money supply. A lot of things here will determine the optimal interest rate. There is no norm 2%. There is no norm. It could be higher than 2%, could be lower. So the Federal Reserve should be no longer considered as the wise guys, which is, if you've watched the movie Goodfellas, they talk about wise guys. In our economy, US economy, you vote in Tuesday, November Tuesday, about you think Republican or Democrat, but it doesn't matter who make the decision about the most important two decisions are interest rate, level of interest rate, and money supply. The person who making this is the Federal Reserve. So why should I care about the government if the Federal Reserve dictates the policy? So we hope in Federal Reserve reform, the Federal Reserve will be no longer untouchable, or they're not the wise guys. In the current version of Federal Reserve, they're not the wise guy. And Jo Powell obviously laughing at us. He screwed up the Christmas Eve in 2018, and he got away with that. And that was the worst Christmas Eve in American history. That mistake. He has a 3 bear market in 5 years. He appointed in February 2018 by Donald Trump. Now we are November 22, probably 4 to 5 years. In these 5 years, we have a 3 bear market in 2018, in December, late December. We have another one in 2020 because of COVID, and we have another one now because of his bad policy. You can't have somebody making 3 mistakes, big mistakes in 5 years. There are some activists on Twitter trying to do some reform with the Federal Reserve. Thank you so much for watching the video. This is what happened in the United States for history, for the truth. This is what happened. Here are the mistakes. The inflation came, the seeds of inflation planted during Trump, watered by Biden, executed by Jo Powell. We go back to what Ronald Reagan said: government can't solve the problem, government is the problem. And the Federal Reserve, with the form we have, is the problem. And just one more thing I want to say. When I say the Federal Reserve control the world, and I give you examples, this is true. And a lot of African countries are growing less now because their central banks have to raise the interest rate to fight inflation in their countries. When African countries raise the interest rate, the growth becomes to be negative. Maybe for the US, the growth will be 0 or a little bit negative. But for African countries who have a lot of population growth, their growth will go down. And this is a big damage to the developing countries in the world. Thank you so much. This is all I have for you. Thank you.